My city, the city you see on your big screen, is the city I see on mine. But the city you see on your big screen isn't all there is to see of my city. This is Ibrahim Chavez, inspired by Angelino James Ellroy's LA Quartet, doing for the month of December my LA Quintet. And tonight on Watch This with RickRamos, we're going to talk about how many viewers get a third taste of the City of Angels, not through the tinsel town of the stars on the Walk of Fame, not through the red neon lighted street corner VHS sex of the other Hollywood, but behind the yellow caution tape, behind the chalk outline, beyond the thin blue line, with LA crime scribe James Ellroy himself, the quote death dog with the hog log, the slick trick with the donkey dick, the foul owl with the death growl, and the white knight of the far right. So buckle up and wear a condom, you quote peepers, prowlers, pederasts, panty sniffers, punks, and pimps, end quote. This is more than a drive-by. It's a drive-through, a fucking walk-through. This tale starts with a city, my city, Ellroy City. And it begins as many stories begin, with a murder. The BBC Arena documentary, James Ellroy's Feast of Death.
I think there are a handful of guys whose fingerprints can lay that whose fingerprints lay on the heart and soul of Los Angeles. One of them is Charles Bukowski, in my opinion. Um, Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett. But I don't think anybody has ever portrayed LA as brutally honestly, but with such passion and love as James Ellroy. There is something about the man and his need to look at the history of this great city and let its difficult background and tensions, whether they be racial or class or um, police versus civilian, inform the world of his heroes, anti-heroes, victims, perpetrators, antagonists, all of these people that make up these great stories of his. And I got to tell you, watching these two documentaries plus numerous interviews with Ellroy, I am a huge fan. I'm very I enjoy the show that he's putting on. I enjoy the depth to which he'll go in order to find that thing that is going to grab a hold of his audience. He is very much an entertainer in one respect, but he's also a cultural psychologist, if you will, trying to understand the violence and the depravity and some goodness that exists in the history of Los Angeles, as well as the historical fiction that he's creating in documenting this. So, that being said, I'm really excited about talking about this man. Let's go to my opening question: the relationship between you and James Ellroy. When did you become first aware of him? When was it? How many of the books have you read? What was it that really attracted you to him that would put us here in 2000 at the end of 2023 dedicating a show to this literary giant?
I I first got into him through the Black Dahlia,
The book or the
the
story,
book,
the
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 book.
the, the real life
Well, I
incident.
mean the both. So
Hmm.
it's the the Black Dahlia case, which we'll touch on,
Hmm.
uh, which is a huge LA crime case. Um, and then LA Confidential, and then starting to go back. Um, and then I got into My Dark Places, and I read The Hilliker Curse. And I think I've read the other one from the LA Quartet because I haven't read all of them. I think I read The Big Nowhere.
Hmm.
I don't think I read White Jazz. Um, and I read the biography, Love Me Fierce and Danger by Stephen
I'm losing
Powell.
you a little bit on this. Um, you read the
Yeah, I need
biography.
to put more coins in the fucking machine. Um, um, I said, what's the last thing you heard?
The biography. You read the biography.
Yeah, I read the biography, Love Me Fierce in Danger by Stephen Powell. Um, and then I got into interviews and fucking like the documentaries and I was always very much interested in it was through the LA crime thing that's what got me, right? So
Yeah.
because I've always been into LA crime. Um, and on different tracks I've been into, the LA music scene, LA crime, LA writing, and all of these things have just converged in all kinds of different ways, leading me towards where, LA theater, LA whatever. And then so ultimately, like you and I meet, you do an well, not an LA podcast, but you do a podcast in LA.
Hmm.
Um, and even, and I never, I don't think we ever talked about it, but even going to your old apartment
The Beverly Boulevard department. Yeah.
to go record,
Hmm.
yeah, off of Beverly or on Beverly. I was like, this is fucking like Ellroy Town.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't think we ever talked about it. And I would always think that when I was with the park across the street.
Hmm.
Um, and so two 2 weeks ago we discussed Hollywood, the industry versus the place, the industry and the place versus LA. And we talked the LA of the big screen versus the Los Angeles of the street and the bus stop of Old Bunker Hill, where Tom Anderson's Los Angeles plays itself. Um, LA at night and from a distance. Last week we discussed Hollywood, the industry, and the place versus LA. The LA of what Legs McNeil in his book called The Other Hollywood, the porn industry, the LA of the sex trade, San Fernando Valley motels, adult bookstores, peep show theaters, street hustlers, hookers, street corners, the LA of the lost angel, right? Tonight it's Ellroy's LA, Hollywood, the industry, and the place versus LA history as LA crime history. Um, it's not really the other Hollywood, but it's the anti-Hollywood in that sense because he describes in you had sent me this link to a documentary, LA Noir,
Hmm.
um, that features like the writer Eddie Muller, Um, and in that, Ellroy describes LA as the nightmare of flawed souls with big dreams, and the precise how and why of the all-time. So he describes, let me go back. He describes it as the nightmare of flawed souls with big dreams, and the precise how and why of the all-time sure thing that goes bad. And that is just a building upon what we've already discussed. And of course, using Tom Anderson's examination of LA as background, character, and subject, we see Ellroy's first LA in the documentaries. James Ellroy's Feast of Death, which is an Arena BBC documentary from 2001, and an earlier documentary called James Ellroy, Demon Dog of American Crime Fiction from '98, I believe. And in all of these examinations of Ellroy himself, Ellroy's history, and Ellroy's work, we see LA as a birthplace, a stomping ground, a prowling ground, a crime scene, and a place to go to be destroyed. It's another LA.
I think it's the with Ellroy's writing, there is a bit of sensationalism there, but that's drama.
Of
That's
course,
grabbing the reader. That's the whole idea of telling a good story. The sensationalism of it, the amping up of the emotions or the violence, but it's built in a foundation of truth that I don't think I don't think meant. I think he's the best writer on the personality of Los Angeles as a whole. Now, if you've listened to this podcast over the 7 or 8 years that we've been doing it, um, you would know my affinity for Charles Bukowski, and his L.A. is a much different L.A. from Ellroy's. Ellroy's L.A. is the L.A. of cops and criminals, small time crooks, peep show freaks, rapists, um, low end gangsters, hustlers. Whereas Bukowski's is working class drunks, uh, men and women in bad relationships, men and women who are doing mind numbing jobs. It's a very different take on LA. And when I first started jumping into this literary world, it was I was 15, and it was Bukowski. Ellroy would be almost a little over a decade later, maybe 15 years later, than when I would start reading him. Um, and it was before the LA Quintet books. It was I believe it was Crime Wave and Blood on the Moon or something like that. I can't remember. Blood Rover. I can't remember the books that I read, but I was starting to get into crime fiction, and I was becoming really fascinated with I was becoming very fascinated with noir. Now, if you listen to Elroy talk, he'll tell you straight up he's not a noir writer. He's a crime fiction writer.
I'm losing you. We got no quarters in.
All right, hold on. Oh shit!
We need some more coins in the machine.
Yeah, I know. Hold on. All right, are you with me?
Yeah, what happened?
I fucking hate Bluetooth. Um, one of the devices in another room turned on, and it pulled the signal.
How did it turn on though?
I don't know. It just does that sometimes. Maybe I forgot to turn it off. Maybe I forgot to turn it off earlier, but I had hooked this thing up, and we were talking just fine. And so that was. Where did we leave off?
All right, so we left off. You said that you started with Bukowski, and then you got into reading about how it was different from Bukowski, and then you got into some of the books that you read, and then
Hmm.
you went off on that.
Okay, so we'll go from there. So like I was saying, there was a little bit of a technical problem, a glitch there. But what I was saying is that I had started off with this Bukowski view of Los Angeles, which is the racetrack, it's the drunk tank, it's drunks, it's a type of alcoholism that exists with working class and lower end of society, people who are struggling to make it but are going to work on a daily basis. Ellroy was much different. Ellroy was a seething kind of danger in the city. He was cops, detectives, and Ellroy is much different from a Raymond Chandler or a Dashiell Hammett, where those two writers would focus on the private detectives searching for working divorce cases, working lost person cases, but would ultimately end up in some kind of a murder. Ellroy, I'm not sure in which documentary, but says, which private eyes investigate murders? None. None of them do. That's a job for the LA Police Department, and Ellroy is a huge fan of the LA Police Department. He's good friends with those guys, with those detectives. And which one is it? The Demon Dog of American Literature, is that the one where he's sitting in the Pacific boxcar
No,
with It's the other one.
that's yeah, he's it's Feast of Death. So
Feast
he's
of Death is him.
literally
Yeah,
literally
feasting.
sitting, and there's a metaphor that I want to get to later
Hmm.
regarding that. But he's sitting at a table enjoying a great meal,
Yes,
um, discussing death, discussing the Black Dahlia, discussing LA crime,
and discussing
cops,
and
chewing the
discussing
fat,
chewing the fat and
shooting the shit,
discussing
talking shit, and swallowing spit. He's he's rapping. He's doing
yeah.
the Ellroy rap, and Ellroy's got the fucking rap. He's got the jive. He's got the patois. He's got the fucking lingo. He loves it. We love it.
Hmm.
Um, and he's there feasting.
Well, that's the part of the thing. It's like this could easily fall into something where people are annoyed with him, but it amps up my appreciation because there's a love for LA. There's a difficult relationship between James Ellroy and the Los Angeles of his youth and the Los Angeles of today, and he'll tell you that he lives in the past. He
Yes.
and it's very important to his style of writing, the fact that the man um, will repeatedly tell you that he's never logged onto a computer, that he doesn't have a cell phone, that he's basically calling himself a dinosaur, something of a recent past where
Yeah,
things
he's in the
were.
fucking tar pits.
Yeah,
He's in
he
the
is.
real fucking tar pits, basically.
And that's what he is, though. But it's almost as if it's a type of method writing where he
Hmm.
has to exist in that world in order to really pull out the story and make it real and factual to the language of the time, the attitudes of the time. So in a lot of cases, and I don't know if you want to get into this later, but there's a level of misogyny and racism that runs through Ellroy's novels that I don't find him to be necessarily racist or misogynistic, although uh, I could very easily be wrong with this. I don't believe it's the case. I believe that the world that he's depicting is a racist and misogynistic world, homophobic, uh, blunt, ugly, unsparing of feelings, and I think that's part of the reason that I love what I've read of his. It's not afraid of depicting human beings in their natural setting and their natural attitudes. I'm not sure which one of the books starts off with whatever detective was in town to kill a nigger pimp named this.
Mm,
And he
yeah.
says it in I don't know if it's in one of the episodes we watched or if I saw it because I watched a lot of Ellroy this week, a
So
lot
did
of
I.
interviews. It's just and they blend into each other and
They do.
they it's because he has his shtick. He has his pattern and his performance, and it is a performance. He has his performance down, and he's entertaining, and it's obvious that he's an entertainer, but he's doing it in such a beautifully um performative way that I don't fault him in any way. I don't look at it as though he's in some ways it's kind of like a disc jockey, and I've heard him live do that pimps pederast panty
Oh,
sniffers.
you've been to
I've
the
seen him.
reading.
Oh, I've seen him, yeah, live. He used to introduce the first film in the annual American Cinematheque Film Noir monthly, when they would do a month of film noir. And I would see, I don't know, if they were showing 18 films, I would see about 11 of them. Um, and he would come down for the first one, and he would come in, welcome the people, go into that spiel, tell them what we were going to see and why he loved the film, and then he was out of there. And I never heard a reading, but that's what I would see him at, and I remember seeing him at a Supercuts on Larchmont, near Hancock Park, near the
Yeah.
area that he used to burglarize when he was a
Mm-hmm.
kid. So, because that was my neighborhood, I lived in his
Yep.
neighborhood, and
Yeah.
you mentioned the demon dog of literature. I think I saw my apartment a couple of times in that.
There was a lot of I mean, literally,
Hmm.
he lived like houses on the other side of the street,
Hmm.
a few houses from you,
Yeah.
and a few houses from where we used to record
Hmm.
in your apartment.
Yeah. In
And he
that little tiny
slept,
studio. Yeah.
he slept in Robert Burns Park,
Hmm.
um, which was across the street from your apartment. Um,
Yeah.
mm, and this is his the LA from which he emerges.
Hmm.
Um, he 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 describes in typical Ellroy style his LA as a city of nightmares. He says LA is a city of nightmares, mine chiefly. Other people's magnified through my eyes. Back in the 40s and the 50s, they were nightmares undercover. They were nightmares that were ignored, held surreptitiously, given other names. Up to this point in my career, my job has been to make those nightmares that were held surreptitiously and not talked about explicit. And for him, those nightmares began with basically his birth in 1948, a year after the Black Dahlia murder. It unfolds with the murder of his mother in El Monte in 1958. And in My Dark Places, he describes the city where his mother died. He describes the valley, the San Gabriel Valley. So San Fernando Valley is the porn valley, right? That's the
Hmm.
stereotype. Well, what's the San Gabriel Valley? In My Dark Places, he says the San Gabriel Valley was the rat's ass of Los Angeles County, a 30-mile stretch of contiguous hick towns due east of LA proper. The San Gabriel Mountains form the northern border. The Puente Montebello hills close the valley in on the south. Muddy river beds and railroad tracks cut through the middle. The eastern edge was ambiguously defined. When the view improved, you knew you were out of the valley. The San Gabriel Valley was flat and box-shaped, the mountain flank trapped in smog. The individual towns, Alhambra, Industry, Bassett, La Puente, Covina, West Covina, Baldwin Park, El Monte or Monte, Temple City, Rosemead, San Gabriel, South San Gabriel, Irwindale, Duarte, bled together in nothing but Kiwanis Club signs to distinguish them. The San Gabriel Valley was hot and humid. Wicked winds kicked dust off the northern foothills. Packed dirt sidewalks and gravel pit debris made your eyes sting. Valley land was cheap. San Gabriel Valley was the white trash heaven. That's where his mother was killed.
Yeah.
It was the 58 hub of the valley. That's from his memoir of his mother's murder, the investigation and the aftermath. And this is where his background starts. If we go Tom Anderson style, background, character, subject, this is one aspect of his LA. And we see where it leads in Feast of Death. We see him return to the Los Angeles warehouse of unsolved murders to look as he did when he was writing some of his memoir material. His mother's evidentiary artifacts. These are his death heirlooms that he can't inherit because, like him, they belong to LA. In Demon Dog of American Crime Fiction, in that documentary, we see him on the prowl, as in Feast of Death as well. But he's going through those old neighborhoods, and he's going through basically your old neighborhood. When we used to go to Larchmont
Yeah.
to go get a slice of pizza,
Coffee,
or
slice,
coffee,
yeah.
and sometimes we'd have to park on the Hancock Park side,
Mm-hmm.
and these are neighborhoods where he would break in to homes to sniff panties and be a pervert, crawl in through a window, reach up through a doggy door to turn the lock, go in. There were girls that he liked. Some of them wouldn't be with him because he wasn't born again Christian, he wasn't saved. And he would go in and sniff around, and he describes in these documentaries, a lot of times he's either driving on his own or he's driving with a cop talking about doing this.
Well,
B&E, breaking and entering.
yeah. It's really interesting because in one
Barking.
documentary, in the '98 documentary, he's driving around in a convertible in daylight. And
Yep.
it's like a travelogue in a weird way. He's just going around, and that has one aspect that I like too, where he's looking at things and he's pointing out, oh, this is the Western Hotel's a real shithole. It used to be like a decent place, but it's like, it's full of winos and dead dreams and shit like that. And he would look at Hancock Park and some of the he would look at Koreatown. He would look at he was examining the world he came from in the bright light of an LA day. In the Feast film, the BBC film, well, they're both BBC, I think, or no, one's Austria and the other one's BBC.
Yeah.
In the BBC film, he's traveling through all of this area with almost an infrared lens at night, and
Mm-hmm.
it's infinitely creepier. There's
Yeah.
something very
Prowling,
disturbing.
barking.
Yeah, he's prowling. He's looking at it from the perspective of a 15, 16-year-old James Ellroy looking for opportunity, looking for an open door, an open window, a chance to steal and to to immerse himself in these confused and misguided emotions that he's experiencing. I mean, it, it's a fascinating life because coming from a broken family with a father who was not exactly the greatest, and a dick slinging kind of big cocked asshole.
Yeah. According to Ellroy, he
A
had an
co-
18-inch sponge.
he was pouring the
He
pork to
was
Rita
pouring the
Hayworth.
pork
So
to Rita Hayworth, laying the salami, as fucking Ellroy says in his most fucking eloquent.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I
But
love that line. That was that's a great fucking line. I will be using that line for the next 15 years of my life. um,
the the last thing that his father told him
yeah,
on his father's deathbed,
yeah,
he looks at James Ellroy and he says, "Try to sleep with every waitress who serves you."
yeah. This was Father Knows Best. This was the wisdom that this man had to
Yeah.
offer, sandwiched across from an alcoholic, promiscuous mother. Who I'm really interested in
Who
getting into
Ellroy?
that book, because My Dark Places is. I found it really interesting that the retired sheriff that Ellroy employed to investigate his mother's death, that he and this sheriff talks about not not necessarily, in some ways, being confused by Elroy upon their first meeting, and um, being confused by the distance between Elroy and the evidence in his mother's death, and being put off by his hatred for his mother. But in going forward with the investigation, it was very powerful for him to watch Elroy fall slowly in love with his mother. And
Yeah.
I found that to be a really powerful thing, and it's one of the best. It's one of the best recommendations that I've ever heard for a book, because it for me it's like, where did that relationship start? Why was it as problematic as it was? And how would it evolve over 50 or 60 odd years from the time of his mother's death in 58 until he wrote that book in the late 2010s, right? Roughly 2010, around that time.
Let me look. My Dark Places. Hold on, let me reach for it here.
So, like, I mean, you find this guy reaching this point of understanding.
96.
Oh, 96. I thought it was much later than that. So we're talking about 40 years later, or 30 some odd years later, coming to
Hilliker
terms with
Curse
his.
is 2010.
Which one? Oh, Hilliker
The
Curse.
Hilliker
Okay.
Curse, My Pursuit of Women.
hmm
Um, and it's go on, and then I'll
Well, the thing about it is that I find him a fascinating character, because he's working out a lot of his issues on the page, and he's putting down how he feels, and it's it's the old stereotypical idea of the artist as the artist's work as therapy, as getting it out. Um, I don't see. I don't see Elroy as a guy that would be in therapy. I don't think it'd be possible for him to really let loose on that. But I think he's somebody who has no problem discussing openly his anger, his frustrations, his sexual frustrations, his sexual inquisitiveness, and his
yeah.
confusion on a lot of the factors of his life. And when you're able to do that with people, especially detectives, I think, who are investigating this, who are kind of, in a strange way, psychologists themselves, in that they're trying to understand why crimes are committed, and the methodology, the reason behind the methodology of certain criminal minds. Um, Elroy talks about these issues. He's not afraid of his dark places, and that's why it's a. I think that's why he's a brilliant examiner of criminality, You could put him in New York, you could put him in Chicago, you could put him in the Southwest in some podunk town, you could put him in the Midwest. It wouldn't matter. Um, I feel that Ellroy would latch on to whatever the depravity of a place is and explore it. His happens to be the shiniest and most depraved of the depravity because
LA.
LA is a very strange town. It's it's this little patch of land that has no water source to it, but is
What's a big
supporting,
patch of land now?
yeah, it's supporting millions and millions and millions of people, and it 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 attracts people from all over the world in their desire to become stars, to become famous, to LA is the lottery ticket that everybody wants to cash. And so they go there thinking, myself included, going there to make the dream come true, to live the dream. And what you find out living there is it's a much darker place. There's an underlying sense of hopelessness and um, predatory. There's a predatory vibe in LA, and especially for young women. And Ellroy has a certain. I mean, he chronicles the lives and deaths of women investigated by men who have a difficult time dealing with their own masculinity and their own sense of purpose. That's clearly apparent in the Black Dahlia, which of course is a real life case, but it's historical fiction. It's him taking a real life case and adding in the characters and how he imagines that they would react. You can see it in L.A. Confidential with the Bud White character. You can see it in at least the descriptions of some of the other books that I've read about him. I'm really excited about jumping into this world and and finding out what it is that Ellroy, trying to find the ugly places that Ellroy is willing to go. And it's even more exciting because for the better part of 20 years I lived in that LA and I lived in that place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I knew those streets. I knew where he was talking about. And I had walked those streets numerous times. Um, Coming from LA with you back to my place, and whether that be for uh, our theatrical experiences, our drinking experiences, our good time experiences, whatever. Um, I know that LA, but what's fascinating to me is you knowing that LA from a different perspective and a longer history.
Mm-hmm.
What's Do you know of anybody who chronicles LA better than James Ellroy? Am I blowing too much smoke up his ass, or
Um,
is it he?
it's the smoke was already up his ass because he blew it himself.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Um,
true.
but you're just choking on it. Um, aren't we
Nice.
all?
Yeah.
I mean, it's Elroy, and we'll get into Bukowski
Hmm.
next time.
Yeah.
Um,
You know what? I forgot all about that. Yeah, we are doing that, aren't we? I wasn't even
yeah.
thinking that. Yeah.
Um, and I resisted Bukowski a little bit. Um,
What do you mean in your personal literary choices, or in getting into it right now?
not no no no, not even not even in my literary choices in terms of writing because you can only resist Bukowski so much.
Yeah.
If you because he is an influence.
Hmm.
So in early choices, I was a direct fucking. So I can't say I resisted as a reader.
Hmm.
Um, Although I stole, You know what I mean?
Sure.
I absorbed. I still resisted. I could say I was a student to a certain degree, but that wasn't like my go-to. Um, I would rather read about the dead than about the drunk or the dead drunk.
I understand. Yeah.
Um, and I would rather read about the murdered than about the dead. Um, and and I would rather read about the glamorous and the murdered and the dead, um, than just about the dead, because it's drama, it's tragedy, it's the rise and the fall, and the doomed and the dead and the glamorous. Um, so I think Ellroy, what puts Ellroy in a unique place to talk about. Well, you went into, like, you could put him in New Mexico or wherever the fuck, like you could
Yeah,
put him
you
in
could
New York.
anywhere in the
The
country.
difference, yes,
Hmm.
the difference is that Ellroy is very much shaped by ambivalence and ambiguity. Um, Personal, an ambivalence towards the world, and a psychological and a kind of ambiguity of of character, um, of the anti-hero, of the femme fatale that is going to destroy you, um, but it's worth it. Um, that's LA noir. That's LA. LA is about ambivalence and ambiguity. Um, what do you want from me? But what can I do to make it seem like I'm doing something for you so that I can get something from you and you can get something on some level from me? But ultimately, we each walk away with something, hopefully unscathed. Hopefully, we walk away at all. Better yet, we drive away because it's LA and the freeway is right over there. And as I say these words, the freeway is shut down here in LA, the 110, because of protests. Um,
Nice.
yeah. Um, and I support that protest. And I fucking do, even though it's gonna be a pain in the ass to drive to work. Um, but I'll just go on. I'll go up Fig. I'll pass the hookers. Um,
Another aspect of Ellroy.
yeah, and so if you look through these places, his dark places, his dad used to, and in the LA Noir documentary, he says that he used to hook up with his bitches, as Ellroy, because Ellroy likes to shock, so he says his
Yeah.
bitches. Um, One of the places that his dad would go was off of Hollywood and Cherokee, and he would drop him. He would just have him wait in the truck or the car, whatever.
I
And
think in this particular
he,
story, he put him in a storefront. He sat him down at a storefront with a comic book, and he left him there. Wasn't that the story?
yeah, I think I've heard a couple of versions of it. I think one he's in the car, the other one, yeah, and he has a comic book,
Hmm.
and but I think in the car there's like some wine.
No, the store. Okay. The one that I heard, and I watched it last night. He's sitting in front of this storefront. He's got the comic book. He's 9 years old, and he sees a bottle of uncorked, half-drunk wine. And something told him,
Outside the
drink it
store.
outside the store. Yeah. So he's near an alley or something, and he picked it
He
up and
drinks
he
it,
drinks the whole thing.
and then he goes prowling,
Yeah. Peeping and prowling. Yeah.
creeping and fucking prowling. And so Hollywood and Cherokee is basically Bordner's
Yeah.
is right there. Bordner's is actually, and Ellroy wouldn't have known this because this is before Ellroy's mom is dead. Um, and Ellroy's mother, he by going through the Dahlia, he's also channeling his mother and his mother's death.
Yeah.
Um, but in LA lore, Bordner's is one of a place where the Black Dahlia frequented, and she lived off of Hollywood behind Florentine Gardens, which was a thing back then. And then later on, it became this fucking, even like on the radio, you would hear Florentine Gardens, dressed to impress, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And
I remember driving past it a lot. It was a white building with pillars, right? And was it a club of some kind? I never went in. I never. Yeah, it's a club.
Florentine Gardens was a club.
Mm-hmm.
And at Bordner's, they still have like Blue Mondays. I've been there, Dancing 80s. They have Bar Sinister. It's still there. He went to Fairfax High School. All of these places inform, you get a sense of what Ellroy's LA informs Ellroy, just as anyone's anything informs them.
Mm-hmm.
At Fairfax, and incidentally, Fairfax High is where Slash and some of the members of the Red Hot Chili Peppers also went. They would go there later. But they had a Jewish population because that's that side, west side of LA. That's where he performed his Nazism in order to outrage his classmates, and they would kick the shit out of him. He lived in your area off of Beverly and Wilton, Norton, those areas. The Watts riots, Darktown to the south, as he called it, intrigued him and scared the shit out of him.
Yeah. As it does a lot of white people.
Of course. Especially when the riots start creeping north.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about him breaking into the Hancock Park homes, sleeping in Robert Burns Park, caddying at the Hillcrest Country Club and the Bel Air Country Club. All this is west of Koreatown, near Paramount Pictures, south of the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, near Larchmont, by mid-Wilshire. This is LA, and it's kind of like a central hub of LA because you can, from there, it's kind of like there's Hollywood over here, there's the west side and the rich parts over here. Not if you go down Wilshire, you can go to the beach. You go down Wilshire on the Route 66. You go on Wilshire on that side, and you can go right back into downtown.
Well, that's what I always felt living there.
Like a donkey dick, as he says.
What was that?
He describes the city hall, the pointed tower, rising into the sky like a donkey dick. It's and I think this is what you're starting to say. Where you used to live was kind of you could access all these different points.
Yeah. I mean, when I moved to South Pasadena, it became much harder to live in that town because the Beverly Van Ness Van Norton area, the Larchmont area was central. I could get to the 10
Hollywood
freeway. Sign. Yeah, right there underneath the Hollywood sign, just a few miles south. I had Paramount Studios right there. I had Koreatown. If I needed to get on the 10 or the 110, it was right there. I could get to Santa Monica. I could go to I could go to Santa Monica. I could go to the Valley. It was easy to move around.
Your position in your LA was central. But the thing about your LA, which was in some part Ellroy's LA, is that from where you were close enough to money to know that you didn't have any.
Oh God, that was very apparent. Yeah, that was thrown in my face every day.
Yeah, you were close enough to stardom and the industry and the place and up there, there's the gritty Hollywood and there's the Hollywood Hills. You're close enough to that to know that you weren't of it. But you're also close enough to poverty, to Skid Row, to the ghetto, to after a certain point to begin to feel like you might belong there or might be sent there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to put your shit out there, but you were also attacked in that area,
I forgot about that. Yeah. That was the only time I've ever been mugged. Well, I wouldn't call it a successful mugging, but yeah, you're right. Wow. Yeah.
A bottle of alcohol saved you.
I don't think many people could say that. it's such a weird. That's the weird thing about LA, and he points something out like that about these $1 million homes or these really nice areas just being 2 blocks away from poverty. And the when he starts driving around Koreatown and he sees how I don't know if he describes Koreatown as being ugly and somewhat dirty, or because he's driving around a lot of LA. He's over there by Rampart. He's in
Hmm.
Koreatown. He's in just the edge of downtown, and this is all within a what 4 or 5 mile radius. It's amazing how close everything is to everything else.
Because it's like mid city ish.
Yeah, yeah. And like I used to teach on Crenshaw, just south of Washington, and that's where you really knew you were getting into you were starting to get into some rougher areas, south of Wilshire, couple of streets down. I can't remember the order of the streets, but I remember just being south of Wilshire, couple of streets down, and then you hit Crenshaw, because Crenshaw hits West Wilshire, doesn't it?
Crenshaw,
Yeah, it does. It hits Wilshire.
it hits it.
It ends
Yeah,
at
because
Wilshire.
Crenshaw's is that as far as it goes? Because that's not really even my LA.
Hmm. No, that's yeah. If I'm not mistaken,
Crenshaw, I don't know how far up it goes because Wilshire goes downtown
mhm.
all the way to the beach.
Yeah, yeah. It crosses over Santa Monica at one point. They switch places. But yeah, it's a very strange city in that respect, where
Yeah, you know
there's
what?
yeah.
You're right. It ends. I remember it ends right by the Wiltern.
Hmm. Yeah, it's right there. So there's that aspect of it. There's Western, and then you're starting to get further and further into downtown, and you do eventually reach the Skid Row, and you see the total. Um, you see, as you described one time, all of humanity, and it was like, wow, you're seeing all kinds of crazy shit in this town, and um, you've worked downtown, you've played downtown, and you've created downtown. I've done the same thing, and I've worked, and I've been there in the wee hours. I've been there overnights, and it's a scary, weird ghost town place. It's a place where you see you see crazy, and that's any big city. That's there are people, when you're in downtown LA and you're in a booth like I was when I was working valet, and it's 3:30 in the morning, and you see somebody just walking through the streets, you can't help but wonder what the fuck is going on in that person's life, that they're walking down here at this hour of night by themselves. You start creating these stories about, who is that person? Where is that person coming from? Where is that person going? And I think that's part of the fascination of what Elroy does, is he gives life to those people. He lets you know that there's a there's a there's a world underneath all of that, and it's filled with pimps, pederasts, panty sniffers, and all that other shit. And he's not afraid of describing it in the most salacious and offensive manner. Um,
Yep.
I think in one of these, I can't remember in which one, but in one of these documentaries I was watching, he referred to somebody as a mud shark. And I'm sitting there
Yep.
thinking, what the fuck is a mud shark? And I thought I had heard every racial epithet, and I had to look that one up. And it's interesting because if you punch mud shark into it, it'll give you Urban Dictionary. And Urban Dictionary already, I don't know if this is a sign of the times, but it starts to already make an apology for the level of racism in the word.
Yeah, it's like ethnic slur,
Yeah.
and then yeah,
It was used for this and description of that. And this is what it literally says. It was used for this to describe this. And then it took on ugly, horrific. It's always ugly and horrific. An ugly, horrific, racial, racist. Um, and it's basically white women who date black men. Not date black men. White women who sleep with black men. And I'm sitting there going,
Nice.
"Holy fuck, this is,"
Yeah.
and this is what he's doing. And but I love that. I love I love an accurate description of really horrible people. I remember about 3 or 4 months ago, I was working a job, and I told you about this. Remember? And this woman that I was working for, that I was helping her out with her family, she said something to the effect that she was going to have to African American engineer this device that she had.
Right.
And it didn't register with me what the fuck she had just said until 15, 20 seconds after. I was like, wait a minute. And I didn't make any kind of a big deal about it. Maybe she saw it on my face, but I said, African engineer. This bitch just said that she needs to nigger rig this thing.
Yeah, but she cleaned it up.
She cleaned it up, which makes it even more racist in my view.
Because if she's not cleaning it up, she's
she's
just
substituting.
changing the verbiage.
Yeah, she's just changing verbiage. It's like
She's just using euphemisms. That's it.
and it's like people talk about the good old days and they talk about how people were better and there was a better sensibility, and it's not true. And I love the fact that James Ellroy doesn't pretend that it was a better time with better people. He just comes out and says, it has always been a dark, violent, ugly place filled with racist people and shitty attitudes. But then I
That's the
find it,
character.
yeah, but then I find it very difficult because he's such a staunch supporter of the LA Police Department. But
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
his mother was murdered,
Hmm.
and these are the men that he encountered. His dad wasn't there.
But is
His
it
dad had put
him
him on the bus.
encountering these people, or is it more the fact that he's getting to know them? He's working with them. He sees them as real people outside of the job. And he understands that to a degree of being able to do the job and do it effectively, you have to turn off certain aspects of your character. You can't be shocked by things. You have to be able to recognize the racism that exists in this world, and you have to be able to um, not excuse it, but understand it for the way that it plays into social relationships. I don't know.
Yes,
I don't know if Elroy's a
yes, yes,
racist.
and yes.
Yeah,
Elroy's racial. I don't know that he's a racist, but he is racial. And
very. That's
this
a
is
yeah.
Elroy's. This is the character. This is Elroy's LA is hard boiled. It's a noir character. He's friends with cops. He's a right winger. He makes a distinction between being a right winger and being a right wing ideologue.
Yeah.
So he may not lecture people about his right wing beliefs, but he believes in he has a conservative personality, which is to say that he it's this shit about like, well, work hard, don't fuck with people. If you break into someone's house, they should, if they kill you, they fucking kill you. The reason why he stopped breaking into people's homes was because of the Manson murders, not because he was afraid of the Manson gang, but because he was afraid that he might get hurt in the
Mm,
process of breaking someone's home as a response to now people being afraid of having their homes broken into.
yeah.
The He's a right winger. He believes in the pursuit of some kind of justice. Remember, his mom was murdered. He was encountered by cops. They looked at him and said, "Kid, your mother's been killed." he knew that what that meant was not that she's been killed, but that she's been murdered. Um, and I think that had an effect on him, and I think it also goes back to the ambivalence. Like, he said that he saw his mother naked and he lusted after her, but he
Hmm.
also hated her because his father hated her.
Well, it was also like, I mean, there was an underlying thing of his mother was a disciplinarian. His mother was strict with
Yes,
him, and
right.
his father, there was a
Was
greater level of
permissive.
freedom that,
Yeah.
because the old man didn't really want to. The old man didn't really want to deal with him. He was like a lot of fathers. He was just like, you. I think a lot of fathers, as they're depicted during that era, were either beating the shit out of their kids to keep them in line, or were ignoring them because they either didn't know how to relate to them or they didn't want to have anything to do with them. And
Well, they were just fucking tired because
oh yeah,
and they had the luxury of, like, the mom doesn't have the luxury of, like, being tired. Um,
no,
but the dad is like, I just came back from fucking work. Shut the fuck up.
hmm,
Um, and this is the character of Ellroy through his LA is a reflection on some level of LA itself. Um, on some level, it's like highly sexual and seemingly permissive, but on the other side, it's got this fucking idea of, like, how things are supposed to be, where certain people and certain types of people are supposed to be, the segregation aspect of it.
yeah,
There is a level of, like, I mean, there's clearly a level of racism in LA that you can see in crime and in cops and robbers, in the freeways, in all of it. He deconstructs the appeal of the serial killer and the sexual power minus the conscience, plus the violence mixed with eroticism. Ellroy's LA again, it's noir, but it's beyond Raymond Chandler, the private eye, as you described earlier. He uses, as the inheritor of all of these writers, the Dashiell Hammetts, the James Cain, the Mickey Spillane, Ed McBain, Joseph Wambaugh, even to an extent, John Gregory Dunn, the husband of Joan Didion. He wrote True Confessions. He's Dragnet. He's all of this cop shit in the mix, plus the LA noir films that are a lot taken from this shit. He's Double Indemnity, Sunset Boulevard, In a Lonely Place, Kiss Me Deadly, his own LA Confidential that he throws back into the pot. He called the film. There are certain points where when he's talking about the film, depending on when it is, if it's around the time that the film came out, he promotes it because it's going to get his book sold, hopefully, right?
hmm,
But later on, he says it's as deep as a puddle. The film. Um, he writes about flawed men and women, flawed books. It's LA as a flawed film, flawed city, sometimes seeking justice, but oftentimes seeking their own destruction. He describes the quote alienated individual who seeks to restore a moral and psychic order to his own life by solving the riddle of other lives in duress. That's how he connects. And you have you have LA as hard boiled as the character, LA as noir, LA as a noir film. You have LA as a victim, going back to the Black Dahlia. Um, Elizabeth Short in 1947, January 15th, 1947, is found in Leimert Park, not well in the area of Leimert Park, which is an area of LA, 39th and Norton.
and
She's mutilated, bisected.
when people hear Leimert Park, Leimert Park of today and back to what, the 70s probably, was a black neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
In 48 it wasn't. What was the makeup? Do you know? Do you remember?
It was probably white at that point.
Hmm.
I don't know if because remember post-war is when you get a lot of African
Yes,
American, like,
migration from up from
migration.
south. Yeah.
Um, so it's after that that you get. Um, I'm sure there were probably already
Hmm.
pockets of Darktown. That section, I don't know the exact makeup at that point and how it changed. But based on Ellroy, Ellroy's idea, based on the work of another investigative journalist, like that area, the one of the suspects, a likely candidate to have been the killer, lived nearby, and he was white.
Hmm.
Um,
He was a doctor.
he was a surgeon, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Um,
So he would know.
so
He would know how to cut a body, drain the body,
right,
and that's what
and
made. I think that's what made the Black Dahlia murder even more captivating. Is that it was so methodical, and it couldn't have been a crime of passion because it was so calculated and so um, uh, intricate in the different aspects of it. I mean, she was tortured over a period of time, and the body cut in half the way it was. Half of her breast was ripped off, or not ripped off, but cut off.
cut off.
The face was bruised and beaten as if it had been beaten with something more than just fists. And then for this, and then for 3 years later, this to happen. No, 10 years later, whatever, however long after
Yeah,
to happen to his
around 10
mother.
years. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it would, and the parallels between the two, and I mean, you couldn't know that it would never be solved, but I think it was something that would grow in its interest, or I don't know if interest is the correct word, but it would be like a cancer growing over Ellroy, needing to be investigated, and I think he needed to research and write about the Black Dahlia in order to come to terms with his own mother's death, in
yeah,
addition to in addition to the investigation that he would undergo with it. And I love the fact that when he talks to those detectives, he talks about closure and how there is no such thing. There is no, however you want to feel about police and detectives in particular, they're a very necessary aspect of our society, and it's overwhelming. Like when they're going through that archive of unsolved cases, that's just what you're seeing on screen. You're only seeing what the camera, as wide as the camera lens is. Think about all the thousands of murders that occurred in that, all the thousands of rapes and murders that occurred in Los Angeles over all the years
sure.
that have never been solved.
Yeah.
That is a frightening thing.
I mean, and it only goes as wide as the lens, and it
Yeah,
only goes as deep as the focus. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly. Yeah,
it's true. And whether it's his mother or the Black Dahlia, for Elroy, it becomes, I think, one aspect of Los Angeles as an emblem,
yeah.
as a metaphor, as LA's a victim as much as it is a perpetrator, because it's like this place where people come to escape whatever. Um, all these fucking Dorothys that come here, all these Dorothys and all these Judy Garlands that come to get fucked with. Um, and they come for one thing, and some of them achieve it, but they pay a price. Not all.
Well,
Um, but
I
the
mean,
idea.
yeah,
Go ahead.
you know the industry that I was in, and it's you put it in a very succinct and very clear description when you say close to fame, but not hitting it, close to wealth, but not hitting it. Being at the comedy store as long as I was, and knowing the comedians, I knew very successful comics. I knew people who were the biggest of all time. That's not, I mean, I'm not I'm not name dropping here and I'm not going to name the names, but I knew some
But we would know them.
you would know them. You would
We
absolutely
would know
know
these
them.
names. Yeah.
They were not happy people. And what you start to realize is that the dream factory that Hollywood presents itself as is it's a bullshit facade because there's always somebody there. There's a Weinstein, there's a Zanuck, there's a, I mean, if you hear the stories of Judy Garland and being felt up by Louis B. Mayer or whoever the fuck it was that, one of the Warner brothers or whoever, getting hooked on diet pills and you know, this level of depravity that exists in that world, it really is a matter of be wary of the of what you hope for. What is it?
Yeah.
Whatever
Be
dreams you
careful
might
what
just
you
get
wish
them.
for.
Yeah, be careful what you
Be
wish for.
careful
You might
what you
just get
wish
them.
for, because you might just get it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I saw comedians who were the biggest names in entertainment who were miserable. I saw comedians that were on the rise and became complete assholes. I saw comedians that were on the down slope and were complete assholes. I saw some good people too, but the overwhelming thing is, and Bill Murray says it. Bill Murray describes sudden fame as you go through about a 4 or 5 year period where you're a complete asshole because there's an adjustment, and it's understandable because you're going from nothing where you're starving, where I was I was living in a shitty little studio apartment with way too much shit for it, um, barely scraping by a lot of months, and I was doing well. I was doing well compared to some of the comic friends that I had who sometimes lived in their cars, who lived in shittier apartments than I did, who um, who were taking handouts, who were living off women. I mean, it's a fucking it's a it's not an easy town. And when you have something like that, the wolves come out.
Hmm.
And I think Ellroy dives into that world as he's more of a reporter than he is really a fiction writer. He's taking things that and he talks about the difference between his early books, um, the books that were the his first published works, Brown's Requiem, Clandestine, Killer on the Road, and then the Lloyd Hopkins trilogy, Blood on the Moon, Because the Night, Suicide Hill, those books, um, which were closer to being contemporary, 70s and 80s set books. But jumping into historical fiction, he says that there was something about those times that spoke to him.
Yeah.
And he became a writer of historical fiction. And part of it was that he couldn't be sued later, or he wouldn't be sued. I love the way he describes the Kennedys. It's like, he could say whatever the fuck he wants about the Kennedys, because if they were going to sue everything, if they were going to spend that much time suing people for what has been said about them, they wouldn't have time to get drunk and rape women. Now that
Yeah.
alone is that's a statement that should get him hung. He should be in courts for some shit like that.
But
But
it's
yeah.
kind of like it like LA. He knows how to
Hmm.
drum up publicity. You saw those clips I sent you, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he knows how to fucking lay it on.
Yeah.
He knows, and in that sense, his character again is also a reflection of LA because Ellroy's LA is on the make. It's voyeuristic, salacious, as I said, racial, if not racist. It's shocking, offensive, entertaining, tragic, self-indulgently well written, cliche at times,
Yeah.
sleazy, prolific, famous, self-mythologizing, fallen from grace but lusting after it with ambitious eyes. It's just like him. Ellroy's LA is like Ellroy himself. And if you go back to Feast of Death, where the cops are sitting at a table, think of to me, it was like this is a great metaphor for LA.
Mm-hmm.
It's a table, a dinner table at the Pacific Dining Car, and it's cops. This is a metaphor for Ellroy and for Ellroy's LA.
I'm looking forward to this. Yeah.
A novelist, a reporter, an actor, and it's all being filmed for a documentary. They're all made into characters now. We're talking about the location of the body dump, and that's just as much a character as anyone or anything else. And the question is, was the Black Dahlia herself for sale? Was she a hooker? That's Hollywood. Cops, reporter, novelist, they go in, and some creepo killed her or whatever, and then in walks Nick Nolte, right on cue. And out of the blue and kind of out of context, and kind of just like, okay, like, what the fuck is he doing here?
Yeah, you can't. I mean, the minute Nick Nolte shows up, you're like, wait a minute, what the fuck is happening now? Because I see no correlation between him and Ellroy. They've never worked together. Maybe did he write Mulholland Falls? I don't know. I don't know what the hell the relationship is there.
Maybe they're just friends.
Maybe.
Maybe they just like to use racial epithets in their work. And they're talking about all this shit about the Black Dahlia, but included in the conversation is, was she a hooker?
Yeah.
Now,
that's a question that could get it shut down today. Well, what difference would that make? Why are you judging her? And maybe they are judging her. Maybe they are making maybe they are passing a certain level of moral judgment on her. But I can see that as an investigation, it would be relevant to really understanding what might have happened. Because you do get this idea of this is a woman who, okay, if she was not a prostitute, if she was a prostitute, then it could be just a sexual situation gone out of hand. But if I was surprised that they didn't use the term cock tease at any point. That was really surprising to me because that was immediately what jumped into my head as far as the description of her. Oh, she's out there. She's hustling men for money. She's making them think that they're going to get to fuck her. And at the last minute, she pulls out of this situation. She gets what she wants and she pulls out of it. Well, that's a very dangerous game to play, and that is a cock-teasing game. Whether you want to subscribe to that word or not, there's a certain reality of the world that we live in that you cannot, or that if you do ignore, you're really doing so at a detriment to yourself.
Yeah, because some cycle that doesn't have boundaries is going to be like, bitch, you're dead.
Yeah.
The difference is, now that's getting into it. And I think that at some point, maybe we can do the Black Dahlia as a film, and as, what is the quality of the adaptation, et cetera, and get in, or, in a documentary or something, and actually get into the case, because it is a deep and interesting case.
It's a fascinating case, yeah.
But it's, but this person was highly skilled, and this person's like bisected her.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems a lot deeper than just from the perspective of in the language of Ellroy, the bitch didn't want to fuck.
Yeah.
So so I killed her.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot more than that,
But then
and
it
so
gets into what I find fascinating is that reporter, that investigative journalist who
yeah,
Ellroy brings in there, and I'm not sure that the detectives are completely on board with
Larry
what he
Hamish,
said. What's that? Larry English?
Larry Hamish, I think
Larry Hamish, yeah.
Hamish,
Hamish. Um, I don't think the detectives are completely on board with what he's saying, but that could in part be ego
sure, sure,
hey, this is what we do. Don't tell us how to do our fucking
yeah,
job.
right.
Regardless of the fact that
He's
this
an
guy is,
investigator,
yeah, this is, but
not a private eye, but a journalist, a reporter,
mhm.
a beat guy.
It's a different. I mean, you look at it, you're like, wow. There's private eyes. There's investigative journalists. There's police detectives. There's a lot, but basically, what it is people asking questions and digging at a scab, and just digging and
Yep.
digging and digging deeper, and the things that he finds. Okay, yes, there are problems with his discovery, and sometimes you're trying to make the pieces fit. I would have to go through his entire investigation of the case in order to really understand it. But you remember when we did the JFK episode?
Yeah.
My realization in watching that film again after so many years was not so much that Oliver Stone had solved the problem. It was Oliver Stone had made me realize that regardless of an answer, the questions have to be asked. And with the Black Dahlia, you have to keep asking what happened and why it happened. If not for that case, because honest to God, everybody involved in that case is probably dead by now.
Right.
There is no justice that's going to be served there, in the same way that there will be no justice served in James Ellroy's mother's murder. But that's not the point. The point is, this is human behavior that continues to this day. These are not
Yeah. Ask the
isolated
questions.
cases. Yeah. When you
Ask
read,
the question. I mean, yeah.
yeah.
Ask the questions for then, so you can ask the questions for now.
Hmm. I mean, how much different is the Black Dahlia murder from the Jack the Ripper case?
Right.
It's the parallels of the skill needed to do what was necessary to make these murders happen, and then the taunting of the police in doing so, and I mean, there's so many different aspects to it that it's a
Yeah. I mean, it's
it's a
like
fascinating
Zodiac
case.
too.
Yeah, and I was thinking about Zodiac as well. I was just in that moment right before you said, I was thinking about Zodiac, where you get into that mindset, and it's funny to me because Ellroy says there's only about what 50 or 60 serial at that time. There were only like what 50 or 60 serial killers in the country. Maybe there were more. I don't know, but the point of the matter is,
Which is already like a lot.
which is a lot, definitely, but concentrated hunters like that, concentrated predators like that, whether it's Ramirez or Ted Bundy or John Wayne Gacy or Alcala, those guys, um, we're surrounded by other levels of craziness that's out there. Shit that's dangerous to us on a daily, hourly.
Getting pulled over by a
Yeah,
cop is fucking dangerous.
it's just crazy how we're constant. I mean, you're probably going to be okay throughout this day, but who knows what going left instead of going right is going to do to your life. Taking the long way home, avoiding this road. Well, now you know you put your path in. You put yourself on the path of something different, and I like that Ellroy embraces that randomness and that the danger of it all. I'm fascinated by I have these books. I have, like I said, I have the LA Quintet, the what do you call it,
The
the USA
Underworld trilogy.
trilogy and the other ones.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'll slowly read through those. I find myself wanting to go into these worlds more and more as I get older. These books, Cormac McCarthy, history. It's kind of sad because there's not a lot of there is time left, but there's not the time that there once was. That's what I love about what we do is that um, you either you either discover something that you didn't know existed, or you rekindle your love for something that you always knew was there.
yeah. And you get to re-experience also, as we're doing here,
Yeah,
through cinema and other forms of media, place. Um, the location tells the story. The location is LA, Hollywood, the industry, and the place. Um, we did how I described people. Many people get their taste of LA through cinema.
sure.
Um, Also, I talked about in last week, which is the following week to how we started, um, the sexual aspect, the the fact that in the days of VHS you could pop it in, and even if there were no outward or obvious signs of Los Angeles in the pornography itself, sometimes there were. Sometimes you would see a swimming pool, or it would be at some fucking Hollywood Hills mansion as a backdrop to some blonde getting banged, right? As Elroy would probably put it. Um, but you were it was an artifact of LA that you were. Um, it was a product of LA that you were consuming, because you were consuming the the other Hollywood. You were consuming a dark side of Hollywood, and you weren't watching stars. You were watching porn stars. And here, it's another sense of LA. When people, maybe they're thinking, when you say Los Angeles, they're thinking, okay, Disneyland, Hollywood, like
Yeah,
that. Then they think the movies like that. Then, maybe the, as I said, it's Playboy Mansion and that aspect. But then it's also, oh, the crime, Skid Row, cops, cop scandal, race riots, gang violence, the black on black Crips and Bloods, or brown, movies about LA, as Tom Anderson talked about. It's like all these cop movies. So many LA movies are about gangs. Um, they're their own subgenres. Um, High profile murders and deaths, killers, Hollywood depictions of LA crime that are often informed by or based on LA crime writers. And with Dahlia, Ellroy, and everything else, and his LA Confidential, Ellroy, he hits a deep and main vein. This is another taste of LA. This is another side that I wanted to cover. In Ellroy's LA, his fiction is true, and his fiction also, his facts rather, they contain fictions themselves. He describes, he says, my secret LA obliterated the other LA. I've been living in it for many, many years. I've reconstructed LA in the 50s in my head and on paper. I have lived in the literal LA and dreamed my own private LA. I denied the existence of non-LA shit because LA's weird shit is the best weird shit on earth. And I grew up when it flourished prosaic. And I agree with that.
I recognize it, I see it, and I appreciate it. This has been an interesting trip, and maybe in the future, because I know we're going to talk LA Confidential, I'll knock out that book before we do so. I have a feeling that we're not done with Ellroy.
We're not done with LA. We're not done with LA.
No, we're not. No, we're not. That's been our episode. If you want to support us, please hit us up. buymeacoffee.com/watchRickRamos. And you know what? The holidays are here. We could really use a hand. We do this because we love it, but it would be great if you could contribute to it. So stop being a bunch of cheap fucks and buy us a cup of coffee here or there. It is appreciated. It is... it's the kind of thing that just makes it a whole hell of a lot easier. So do yourselves and do us a favor. Let's keep this ball rolling. Our thanks to
Go ahead.
No, you were going to say something. I'm sorry.
I was going to say the same thing that you were. Or this episode is thanking Rob Bundy Style. That's an appropriate name for James Ellroy. We did LA Rob Bundy Style today. Buy a coffee, tell a friend, tune in, and watch this.
Good. We also want to thank Liver Noir, who bought a couple of coffees. So he loves the broadcast, and we make him appreciate film. Rob Bundy, thanks for the free content, and he loves the show, so we want to say thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back next week. We'll be diving into Bukowski's LA, and looking forward to that. So you guys be good, take care of each other, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye now.